Okay, welcome to I think it's episode 21 of Experience This. I've been abandoned this week by my co-hosts, Laurie and Bruce. It's some big news today, so I wanted to do an episode. So I've been trying all day to get some decent guests together, but unfortunately I've failed and I'm stuck with these three. So we're not going to win any awards for diversity, that's for sure, but hopefully we can have a good conversation. So can we go around the room and get a quick intro, starting with Alex?
Yeah, so my name is Alex Kremer. I am one of the co-founders at Arrival, which I think many of you have probably heard about. About a year and a half ago, I left tours and activities for greener pastures, running a new startup, helping growing companies scale their culture and accountability. So my company's name is Circus, and every startup is a circus. So that's the wink and the nod behind that name.
Excellent. Exciting space. It was great hearing about what you're doing, Alex. I think you're in a great space there. Got lots of exciting times ahead. Stephen.
Hi, yeah, I'm Stephen Otto, the founder of Walk Tours. We run sightseeing tours all over the world in Europe and North America. And we were acquired a few years ago by the Hornblower Group. So we're officially part of their portfolio and have been operating in tours and activities. Oh, gosh, I guess I started as a guide almost 20 years ago. And started walks 13-ish years ago. So yeah, I've been around for a while, and exciting news today to see the fundraising keep going in tours and activities.
Thanks, Stephen. And calling from Australia bright and early, Chris.
Hey, everyone. Yes, it's bright. In fact, yeah, here in Melbourne this morning. I'm Chris Atkin. I'm the CEO of Resdy. If you haven't heard of Resdy, we provide booking software or res tech to the operator, helping them get their business online. And also provide a channel management tool to mean that different res techs and booking software can access their distribution channels, as well as having a pretty broad array of distribution channels to mean that resellers can sell online using live availability.
Excellent.
So we're a proud customer of Resdy, I gotta say.
Me too.
Thank you. Oh, yes, of course, we've got two here. And I'm sure that if Alex had time on the weekends to do walking tours of New York City, he would use Resdy as well.
Yeah, I was just about to sign up, Chris, but I'll have some questions for later.
So yeah, I think some people use it for a hobby, right? They just get an account and play around with availability just for fun.
It's an official hobby using Resdy.
Good. So what's not a hobby is raising $194 million, which happened this morning, or it happened recently. It was announced this morning, I think. We're talking about GetYouGuide, of course, and I think this puts GetYouGuide at over $1 billion. I don't know how this debt stuff, if we should include that in $1 billion, but it's been $1 billion announced over the last, what are we at, 11 years now? And actually, this guest list is not the worst, because I think you've all had experience raising money and done startups, and you've all been in the travel industry as well. So just love to hear some different perspectives on GetYouGuide. How they got here, how we got here, what their future looks like. Is it great? Is it a disaster? What are your thoughts on this current fundraise? And I think it was about 50% of it was a loan, was an overdraft, if you like, and 50% of it was equity.
So, revolving credit facility, I think.
85, I think, is the sort of Series F round of fundraising. And the 109 or whatever the balance was is, as you say, an overdraft.
Yeah,
I think they call it revolving credit facility in corporate terms, but I think you and I would know it in the UK as an overdraft.
I like the overdraft term. It reminds me of being a student when I had to ask the bank if I can take 50 more pounds out in overdraft. But anyway, it's a lot of money. Love to hear what you guys think. And last thing, I think I didn't see this really confirmed by anybody, but there was a $2 billion valuation. I think TechCrunch came up with that, and then some others kind of copied it. Maybe it was made up, maybe it was real, but that's the number that's been bandied about.
I wouldn't be surprised if that number came directly from the company, because the TechCrunch piece was straight out of the horse's mouth. I think their PR at GetYourGuide has always been fantastic, and that piece was straight from the horse's mouth, so I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I mean, when you have convertible notes and revolving credit, it's tough to say if there's an actual valuation there, because it's more of an implied valuation based on like if we were to convert, depending on the cap and all these various other levers that are there. But I'm guessing that they did choose that number strategically based on maybe a best case scenario.
So can somebody go through a typical startup flow from pre-seed, seed, A, B, C, D, E, F? Who can explain how that typically works with approximate percentages and what the investors are looking for? Who's got the 1 minute summary of how that works? All three of you could do it. Who's going to have volunteer?
Chris and Alex, back to back.
Well, I'll just say this. There's actually no like standard, like cookie cutter playbook for this stuff, especially for travel startups. And I was fortunate enough to get to know Johannes and Tao right as they were getting started, and I think it was 2011, 2010. I was founding a different tours and activities startup at the time. And one thing that's always impressed me about specifically this team, Johannes and Tao, is, they've always raised at every stage, at every round, they've always raised from the very, very best investors for that stage. I think it started at the seed stage with pro-founders, Series A, they went to, I think it was Spark. It's just been every round, literally the world's best investors. And even this round, I don't know, this was not really reported, but Blue Pool is actually family office money of the Alibaba founders, Jack and I think Tony. It's mostly family office money, obviously very incredibly connected people. And so once again, they just hit it out of the park in terms of quality around. To answer your question in terms of what do founders give away, there's a lot of ways to skin that cat. I think it's very situational. So I wouldn't want to speculate on where they're at now on their cap table. Once you get to Series F, there's a lot of variables. There's probably thousands of variables, right? In terms of individual investors, groups of investors, priorities, liquidation preferences if they're involved. There's a lot of variables. So I don't think anybody without literally inside the company will be able to really comment on that.
And I think particularly when you throw in a pandemic, they raise money in a somewhat of a duress situation, to keep the business going through those early parts of the pandemic, which again will have distorted it further. And, it's all, I smiled almost when you use the word startup, if it's one word or two. But because, these guys are $2 billion now, they're a business that's got their eye on an IPO, becoming a really significant force in the space now. And this is we use the Series A's, B's, F's or whatever to describe it. But, this is a big corporate entity now that's got the chance to build and consolidate a long-term future if they get things right.
Yeah, 13 years in, it's tough to say startup anymore, but
if it makes you feel cool, that's fine. So the TripAdvisor valuation today is about 2.2 billion. And as I think most people know, TripAdvisor is made up of TripAdvisor and Viator is all included in that 2.2. How do we reconcile that? Viator's sales are far higher. Viator alone is far bigger than GetYourGuide. How do we reconcile that the valuations are almost the same? The growth rates seem similar. I saw something about GetYourGuide saying they were 4x this year, which is more than Viator, but 4x seems like a lot.
Yeah, you look at the public markets, right? So it's a totally different perspective. They're wrapped into a company that has a long history on the market, and that's going to have its legacy tied into, the different issues that it's had as a company. And they've had a lot more issues overall as TripAdvisor than GetYourGuide, independently. But, I think Viator has done great things in the last few years. But in the recent statements, they haven't been profiting either. So you've got multiple companies that are growing fast, but still, pretty far behind in terms of profitability, still burning cash. And I think this raise more speaks to their need to have a long enough runway in case economic turmoil, in case other issues in Europe, expand and so forth. I think this is more about that than it is about the investment in AI, personally.
Yeah, I'd almost use an analogy that it's kind of like a racehorse. Viator has has hit the track and has run some races. It's a known quantity in that sense, as part of a public organization. And and GetYourGuide still hasn't quite hit the track yet. There's a lot of promise. It's got great breeding, but it hasn't really had to operate in the same environment as Viator. But there's a lot of belief that they could potentially make quite a difference.
So if they've just hit the track, I would think an outsider would think of those two as almost the same company. Not the same company, the same model.
Yeah, look, I think that that's true to a degree. If you look at probably the scale of their operations and the customer experience, if you go to it. But if you look at it still, I think there is a big difference between the relationship that the consumer has with those brands. If you probably look at how much each business is spending on Google to be able to get access to that customer, I think people probably are more repeat visitors on Viator. I don't have the data, it'd be my suspicion. And that's the big challenge for GetYourGuide, I think, is to build up a repeatability, build up a loyalty amongst their customers, that people go to GetYourGuide first, rather than ending up at GetYourGuide as the place to buy something when they've searched for bridge climb or they've searched for a walks experience.
Yeah, and they're both brand forward, direct to consumer e-commerce businesses. Funnily enough, I've seen video ads on TV. What do they call those? Commercials. I forgot the word for a minute there.
Video ads. Yeah.
Yeah. Pre-roll on TV. What is that called? So yeah, and they're shown on live television. GetYourGuide and Viator ads, which was funny. They're actually both very good ads. So clearly they are pursuing very similar strategies. I think web-wise they have very similar products, so and similar supply at this point. So the differentiator really comes down to partnerships and customer experience, and those kind of education, important issues, but not enormous differences.
But Stephen, as you noticed, sorry, Christian, one thing just to jump in there, one thing they both also share is still some pretty negative unit economics, right? And that I think fundamentally reflects in obviously GetYourGuide needing to tap the capital markets for some more money. But I think fundamentally for a company to go public like GetYourGuide, the question really becomes like, well, how can they improve their unit economics? Just applying more money is not going to magically solve this problem. And I think this.
Alex, can you just define unit economics for those that don't know the term?
Sure. I mean, basically the cost of what you sell versus the income you make from it, right? It's basically really simple. And the question is, can they profitably sell an activity when all factors of their businesses are taken into account? I don't think that's happening yet, right? Again, reflected by their need for more capital. I don't think Viator is far ahead or behind in that term either. I think, this is an industry issue, actually. The unit economics in tours and activities, as we all know, are extremely different from hospitality, hotels, other sectors of travel. And I actually have been wondering, especially since I saw the announcement last night, how kind of these big league investors are looking at how that's going to change. I mean, the data is the data. I'm sure the internal data at GetYourGuide is not very different from what we're talking about here. So what are they seeing that we're not seeing, right? And therein lies the question, how are professional, big money investors really seeing how the unit economics are going to change? Because I don't think Google, performance-based marketing, all that kind of stuff, like the cost basis there is not going to change. So clearly there is still an assumption that GetYourGuide will at some point become a public company, having figured out a way to more profitably sell activities and acquire customers in a much more cheap way than they are today. And I don't think that's going to be via Google, personally.
Yeah, I think just picking up on that, the belief has to be that they haven't hit critical mass scale to become the profitable behemoth that you need to be to go successfully to IPO. And as I say, I think it comes in two elements. One is just the the cost of acquisition piece that you mentioned. So that's the amount of money that the business has to spend to get a customer in the door. Because I might buy 3 times from GetYourGuide in the year, but if each time I bought through GetYourGuide, having Googled a specific activity and click through from a Google link, then that's been really expensive for GetYourGuide. Whereas if I had done that the first time and gone, well, that's a really great website. Now I'm thinking of doing something, I will go to GetYourGuide to do that. Then you've reduced by 2/3 the cost to GetYourGuide of getting my money. And that's, in essence, the challenge that GetYourGuide need to solve for. Because if they solve for that, and then they continue to get more and more bookings and hit that critical mass of scale, then you have yourself a business that is profitable at that unit economics level that Alex was talking about, and then on a scale that means that it can grow and make more and more money, which tends to be very appealing to the capital markets or the the individual shareholder and funds that when you get to IPO.
Yeah, I mean, as a global operator, we're competing on Google with the larger platforms for very similar ad space, so we know what it costs to acquire. And being a larger, scaled up operator, they don't have a magic formula to make it cheaper. In fact, in many cases, they end up being more expensive for that, just from a relevance standpoint. But with our couple hundred products, or in the Hornblower Group overall, many hundreds of products, the rates they charge versus what you can get in return from paying ads is often not going to be a sustainable model. And I don't know that there's enough return on direct advertising for that. So then it begs the question: can they get enough recurrence and customer lifetime value to turn a profit, to not need to keep paying Google? And since we raised Google as the question, and obviously in the last 3 years they got very busy in things to do, and I'm sure Christian can tell us a lot more about that. But I think that's a risk for any large platform right now. And it's been, if you've been to any talk from any travel CEO in the last 4 or 5 years, they've shifted big time their story from Google's a great partner to, hey, Google is taking away everything, let's all gang up on Google. It's a big change. And so
to be fair, sorry to interrupt this. To be fair, I think Johannes has been pretty consistently somewhat hawkish about Google. Been a consistent critic of Google through various times, and I think they are certainly not in a situation that they are accepting of that situation. I think they recognize it has to be part of the journey, but if you hear them talk, that they've started to move towards talking to Johannes in Berlin earlier on in the year, starting to bring more unique experiences in there and working out how do we try to distinguish ourselves in terms of what you get, to mean that you drive a customer to go to our site to browse almost and discover. Because I think this is one of the biggest, to your point earlier, Alex, about why is the experiences industry more challenging than travel in general. It's because we've got a lot more to do in terms of getting things online, firstly, but also there's this far more complex and hard to pin down discovery exercise that comes with what to do in experiences. And historically, your rough guide or your whoever you might talk to when you go in destination is helping you to understand those things, and nothing's really replaced it other than just Googling. And so the challenge for anybody in this space is to find a way of being a really viable part of the discovery process, because if they can do that, then I think that whole CAC issue gets cut significantly, and you're really at the races to be able to create a big and profitable business.
That said,
hi, it's Marika from the Von Mack Agency here with your tourism marketing half minute. We're running out of time, guys. The deadline to move to Google Analytics 4 is July 1st. And while it's not as intuitive as GA Universal, we have zero choice but to embrace the change. Here at Von Mack, we're leading the switch and readying our clients. But if your company manages this in-house, take care to download all of your Universal reporting, ensure that events and conversions are set up correctly, and have your marketing department pull reporting from both GA4 and Universal for comparison. If it looks good, you're all set.
most travel startups still face this issue, which is the incidence issue, which is in plain terms, how often someone actually needs this product, and will they remember your brand when it comes time to look for the product. And I think thus far, it's been, I've been part of this industry for 12 years now. No one saw that, right? I think GetYourGuide has a great brand, right? It's memorable, but that doesn't mean the average Joe walking down the street here will remember them after having used them once, right? Like, it takes a sustained level of usage for a specific product for a consumer to really get ingrained with a brand. And I just don't think, maybe in the past couple of years, there's been some slight exception with the recovery in travel and people doing more. I just don't think there's been that revelation in the market where someone has figured out, okay, I'm going to cheaply create a memorable brand that consumers go directly to and bypass the entire acquisition process you're talking about in terms of Google. So that's something that GetYourGuide, no matter how much money you have, I don't know how much more money you can spend on brand. I mean, they've raised close to $1 billion. We've talked about it.
And Vital still talks about that with their quarterly earnings reports. Sales have increased or doubled or tripled, whatever they have. And why haven't you made more money? Oh, we're buying loyalty and we're buying brand name. But Vital's been doing it for what, 25 years now? When does it start to bear fruit?
And to be fair, they probably have the best brand, the most memorable, the most, partly because of the legacy there. But they do a great job. And I think that actually the TripAdvisor acquisition set them back on that a good bit, because it was muddled. And I'm not surprised to see the video ads and commercials and the brand forward now aspect of Viator, even from Trip, it's much more front and center. They've done a lot of investment on that, and speaks to, that they saw that as a drawback. But yeah.
So we all agree fundamentally the frequency is the problem in this space, right? The lack of frequency in the purchase means it's difficult to get loyalty. We all agree it's very fragmented and very expensive to acquire customers. We all agree that GetYourGuide's done a fantastic job at raising $1 billion. I don't think anybody would deny that. But at the end of everyone's conversation, there's a negativity, like, where do they go from here? They're stuck. How do they get out? And it's not, oh, well, we'll create a better app and everyone's going to download the app. It's not, we're going to find some more unique experiences. That's what everyone's pitched from day one. So what is the way forward?
Well, yeah, it's interesting. As a res tech, we sit kind of at the deep in the bowels of helping to support a partner like GetYourGuide from a distribution perspective. And what's interesting is that what we see, and and what I quite often talk about, and I've talked about a lot more since pandemic, is that we get lumped completely as the experience industry within travel, whereas actually we have a foot in travel and we have a foot in leisure, whatever you may call it, because if you were to go to the zoo this weekend, you'll see tourists and you will see many local families or people that have driven an hour or two to be able to go to the zoo. And I think that was something that helped sustain our industry through the pandemic in a better way than the other parts of the travel industry. People weren't able to travel overseas, or they weren't able to go and do domestic flights to somewhere or stay in Airbnbs. But what they could do is the minute they could leave their house, they were doing activities. It would just be more local things. And I think that no one has really cracked that insight, that truth, if you will, about what the experience industry is, and built a brand that is as relevant to someone that's going on their 2 weeks summer holiday as it is to someone that is going, what am I going to do with the kids on Saturday or during this, the school holidays, even though we're not going somewhere. And I think that most of the big brands, the OTAs in the space, are still very internationally travel focused. And I think pandemic definitely asked the question of GetYourGuide. And one of the reasons why they've come back stronger, and I suspect one of the reasons why they've been able to land this fundraising, is that they strengthen their business through having to be focused domestically within Germany, their stronghold. And as a result, therefore, have got a better business looking forward. But I think they and anyone needs to expand on that and actually make themselves be able to stretch from what am I going to do tomorrow with the kids, as well as what are we going to do in our 2-week holiday? And then ask the brand that question rather than work it out through Google.
I would
That's
also
a
add,
theory, but have they made the only thing I've heard from that is that the TAM, so the total addressable market, Arrival, I think, says it's 252 billion or something. Is that right, Alex? And then Airbnb put this number out there that it's 1.3, which includes your zoo and your local trampoline park and all this local stuff. But I haven't heard GetYourGuide making moves to going into that market. Not to say that they won't, but Alex, do you want to jump in?
There's two parts to that. One is the types of products, and one is the type of customer. And I think they are and have been trying to do that with a type of customer in Germany, particularly, and through the pandemic. So I think they've made some progress there. But whether they've done it in terms of the breadth of product, the inventory they're looking to sell, I don't know so much.
But they have diversified the product to be more, they have a ticketing product now that they are pushing to institutions, in a way competitive, Chris, to Resi. They also are doing white label website type of work as well. So going beyond reselling and distribution and, pure play OTA to experimenting at least with SaaS product, on the side. Whether that's, something that becomes core or whether that was, an experiment like Originals or, who knows where that's going to land. But
yeah, I got that sales pitch last week at IPW. It was an interesting one. Alex?
But are all these, I think all these experiments that they've been doing over the years, right? And they've tried quite a bit. We've seen branded tours, we've seen a bunch of different experiments. I think they all get down to one singular point that it's very under-discussed. I'll even say even at Arrival, which are the basic economics of selling a tour. There are, in this space, many operators, I would say most, when we talk about the breadth of product and hundreds of thousands of suppliers, I would say, or operators, I would say most of them are not operating a business in a way that allows someone to profitably resell their product. If you consider the cost of acquisition, like we were talking about earlier. And so this, I think, is where the industry and particularly GetYourGuide in some of their experiments really needs to start taking a strong look at, it's great to have 300,000 products or 1 million products on your platform. But if 900,000 of them or 990,000 of them are ones that really operate on minimal margin, well, the tendency then always is to focus on the products that are higher margin. And that's what I think GetYourGuide's experimentation reflects, is trying to figure out, how do I make something make me a little bit more money? And that includes, right, in this case, attempting to cut out a technology middleman. Not calling Chris a middleman here, sorry, Chris, but it's more about cutting out a cost in the middle in order to see if that will change the needle. And that, I think, is something we don't talk about enough, right? There's a lot of small operators in this space that are struggling and not making a lot of money. And then they start hating OTAs because they only see it as a cost rather than, someone who's bringing them new customers. And there's all these layers and layers and layers that fundamentally mean OTAs really can't, specifically activities OTAs, can't really blow it out of the water and have these amazing financial results as we might see for a hospitality OTA like Booking.com. And that's really the difference. It's a hospitality player can comfortably give you 10%, 20%, sometimes even 30% and not blink an eye, because the basket size in hospitality is way bigger, all that kind of stuff, right? And so how does activities, and I think this is, again, going back to the fundraising question, how does activities change from within to enable a more successful distribution ecosystem? Because I think if you put 20 operators in a room and you say, hey, would you love all your business to be direct? They'd of course say yes. But then the first word out of their mouth would be, but that's really hard, right? Like, I got a lot of stuff going on. I got to run my tours, like, digital, like figuring out Google, figuring out AI and the next chatbot and whatever else we all talk about. That's overwhelming for most operators. So how can we change the industry from within and make the process of operating a tour more profitable and profitable enough to bake in the cost of third-party distribution, which is I just don't think fundamentally something we've talked about enough in the sector.
Very well said, Alex.
100%, 100%. And we actually feel, as that sort of middleman, if you will, we feel and take on a great responsibility to be part of that, because it is about education, it's about data, and by being able to provide technology at the fingertips of the operator, we give them the chance to firstly reach those channels. So it becomes a pertinent question: don't I use them? Ultimately, to give them the tools then to be able to manage those channels, to recognize value. But we do so much work, whether it be one-on-one when we're helping to set up the operator, or more collectively with our communications, or when we sit on stage to try and educate and inform, as you say, because it starts with your strategy as a business. How are you commercially setting up your business to be able to work with the distribution partners that you do? And then technology is just a subset of the solution to help support it, and so I think that's the big challenge. We have a lot of operators in this space that haven't necessarily got clear in their mind the role or the return on investment of a trade partner versus direct, and as a result, it leaks out various problems into both their business but also into a reseller's business.
Isn't it the same for everyone, though? If you talk to retailers, aren't they having the same conversation? I know I'm looking a lot into short-term rentals, and it's the same conversation over there. They complain about Airbnb and Vrbo and Booking and, trying to get direct business. Don't retailers have the same conversation? They complain about Walmart and Target and wonder how they can sell their ketchup direct.
Yeah. In some cases, the take rates are higher, not in accommodations necessarily. I think it's, more in the 15 to 20% range by and large, but tours and activities have gone above and beyond that now, and the 20 to even 40% range. I think some of those Walmarts and Targets are higher than that. Amazon for sure. So I don't think we're in that strange of a spot, as the cost of sales has gone up, and it has for the third parties as well to resell. So.
I think
now the question is, does it keep going up or does it go down, or where the pressure is going to lead us in the next, with Google coming in, with, operators getting access to easier and easier tools like Resdi, like other platforms to sell direct, that there's a lot more competition happening in that way now.
I thought you were going to plug Magpie for a second there, Stephen, but you...
Oh, and Magpie, as a proud user also of Magpie, definitely helping you get distributed better, faster. I mean, yeah, sure.
One wants to be careful in, complaints is part of human nature. If everyone was doing really well, when someone's trading with someone else, they'll each slightly complain that they're not getting a slightly extra, an extra percentage point there. But I think that if you look at the layer of it, it generally, if you take big retail, the multiples are exploitative and do push right at the very edge of the sustainability of the individual suppliers utilizing their position of strength from a position of great strength, profitability wise. We haven't reached that maturity. I think we'd love to reach that maturity in our space. As we said, we're talking about bigger OTAs here that maybe haven't even started to make a profit yet. And we look at an operator group that, like restaurants, only half of them make it through their first 6 months of operation, and there aren't loads that make a lot of money. And so we have a far more primal concern within our space to get a level of knowledge, a level of sophistication in play on a day-to-day, and it's a business as usual, to mean that everyone has a healthier business, and therefore the ecosystem as such is healthier as a result.
So you've all thrown out you've just thrown out problems all last half hour. Alex wants to revolutionize the industry. I think you both agree. That's not the job of a single startup to change the industry or the industry structure. Go horizontal, as in go after the local market, is a potential way out. But they to get an exit, what do they need to? They need to go public for $4 billion or something like that, or sell on to the next person for $4 billion or thereabouts. How do they get to the next point? So let's go around the room in the last few minutes. Were you part of this last time we did this, Stephen? I think you were. So if you were Johannes and Tao, what would you do to get to you need to get to $4 billion valuation in the next 2 years?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see any way personally, and I was on your LinkedIn thread earlier today talking about this with somebody. I don't see any way to do this through strategic acquisition. For me, I think it's going to be more likely to be IPO, just given that I think they can be a darling of the public markets, kind of a la Airbnb, a little more fun, exciting type of product, consumer direct brand product that could do better and have a fresh start compared to a TripAdvisor. So I think that's the way to go. How do they get there? I mean, number one, I do think that deleveraging their or reducing their exposure on Google will help that, and I think they are doing that. I mean, we've seen certain trends that would suggest that they're working to reduce their dependence on Google. And I think that video could be a big part of how they do that, and they're doing that very well recently as well, doing a lot more investment there. Partnerships. I think I mentioned last time that in partnerships across other players, like some of the things they've done with airlines or banks. I think that's really helpful to kind of tap into captive markets. But yeah, I don't know. That's a crazy valuation to throw around when you're talking about companies like TripAdvisor being, on paper, quote unquote, around the same or lower or whatever it is. And also, it's interesting to me that you have large platform players like Airbnb, Booking.com, Expedia, and TripAdvisor, who have made large, aggressive moves into this space. And I don't think you would say, when all the dust was settled, that any of them were super successful, definitely not profitable. And all of them have either significantly pivoted from their initial efforts, and the ones who acquired have had long roads to find I think maybe the best acquisition might be Musement over at TUI Group. Figuring out, again, like I just said, how to take a captive market and bring it into and bring the right technology to them to get the yield that you need. But so that's how I think that they need to do it. I think it's public play. Is AI going to make a difference here? We didn't really touch on that. I don't think so. I think that's more of a PR move than a consumer move for a consumer brand right now. I don't know if in the next 2 years, consumer behavior is going to be significantly shifted by AI, just given that a lot of these companies have been using machine learning models for recommendation engines. I don't think that the chat experience is going to significantly change how people buy or what they buy, maybe slightly what they buy, but I'm not going to buy more because I can chat with a chatbot about it, in my opinion. So yeah, I think this is more just able to continue the investments and growth and potentially just, shore up in case they need to burn a bit more before they go public.
Yeah, I think if you're raising today and you don't make AI part of your pitch, you're a bit of a fool. So that had to
exactly. And kudos to them for getting that plugin out there. I mean, like right on the heels of Expedia. So
unfortunately, Sam Altman said yesterday that plugins are not working and probably not going to be part of the future. But you know what?
Well, Sam Altman said it, then take it as gospel.
But you know what? They're out there. They're doing it. They're working. They're learning, and they're in the space, which is fantastic. Chris, same question. What would you do? Do you remember the question? It was a while ago.
It was a long time ago, but I think I can vaguely recall it. It was a GetYouGuide one, yeah.
It was GetYouGuide, yeah.
Yeah, look, I think that. Firstly, you've got to remain positive. There is still so much opportunity in this space to be able to sell experiences online to people around the world, domestically, et cetera, et cetera. So I think there's 3 simple rules for the guys to follow. I think the first one is you've just got to find the ways to, like I was saying before, get that repeat business, get people coming to your website first, not through Google. So you cut out that reliance because, I don't know what percentage, but a very, very large percentage of the money they'll have raised, that $1 billion, has gone straight to Google. So they've got to wean themselves off that, if you will. The second thing is part of capturing that market is they're not going to get everything direct themselves. So how can they drive and access? There's so many people that want to sell experiences in our industry. How do they unlock that? Through branded partnerships with other resellers, airlines, hotel chains, whatever else it may be. I think that's number 2, because that's a big market. And then the third one is really focus on the part of your business that's going to help you get to $4 billion, which is growing your revenue line. And I think partnering effectively under the bonnet, if you want, under the hood, in the supply chain, in the logistics, and don't try and have direct connections with everyone. Really work with technology partners like ourselves and others really more effectively, so that you can not get dragged into solving the technology problem. You solve the consumer problem, and then you'll probably get to 5.
If they would just follow your 3 rules, they'd go straight to 5. Thanks.
But will they need to get to 5? Because I'm charging $1 billion for the advice.
Excellent. You pay that afterwards. Yeah. Alex. Because you're out of the industry except for your arrival thing, so you get to speak freely.
I think first of all, Stephen and Chris had some really excellent suggestions. I agree wholeheartedly, but I'll add a couple of things, or maybe a little bit more abstract. The first one, I would absolutely try to make this $185 million last as long as possible. And what I mean by that is really it's pray that the capital markets, especially the public markets, start recovering and getting some mojo back, because that, I think, fundamentally is one of GetYourGuide's, and not just GetYourGuide's, any late stage startup's biggest headwind right now. I think you don't have to be a financial Times reader to understand right now there is a backlog of private companies that are waiting to go public and frankly return a lot of capital to their investors. That macroeconomically is a huge headwind for GetYourGuide. It is probably why we're seeing a Series F rather than an IPO right now. And so fundamentally, that making that dollar stretch as far as they can until the markets recover is step one for me. The other thing, going back to the AI topic, I actually disagree that AI will not have an impact before they go public. I think we're going to start seeing AI assistants. Think about Inflection's product, obviously ChatGPT. There's a bunch of them out there now. I think we are going to start seeing that being a new frontier for paid placement. Your personal, AI-powered chatbot is going to start recommending things that people have paid to be recommended. That is absolutely coming. It's going to be the Wild West for probably several years. And there's going to be a lot of businesses that figure out smartly that it is a much lower cost of acquisition than they can get on Google. And if you combine some of these factors and some of these pieces of advice we've all mentioned here, you can suddenly craft a pretty good story for when some of that exuberance in the public markets returns. And then you've got a pretty darn good story on going public. That said, there's always one big caution, which is what we're seeing right now with the likes of Uber. A well-seasoned travel executive, Dara, has his hands full trying to publicly explain, like, hey, we're trying to make these unit economics better, but when we get more scale, it'll be great. Well, yeah, Uber, everyone knows about Uber already. It's a household name. How are you going to make, how are you going to grow even further? So going public too early can be really, really, really challenging, not just on the team, but investors and everything else. So patience, going back to my first point, is what I would encourage the team to have.
Excellent. Well, if you get me started on the AI, we'll be here for the next hour. So I'm just going to say that Magpie released our AI agent this morning, and I'm planning my trip to Bangkok using my agent. I'm going to Bangkok for Arrival, which I think is in 11 days. I'll see you there, Chris. We still have 100% attendance record.
Indeed, yeah. I'm definitely going to be there because I'm booking it myself rather than relying on the Magpie agent API. So yeah, hopefully see you there. And I wish I could be there. I have to probably just comment on the fact that we may have just completed the first ever GetYourGuide discussion that didn't insert the, well, aren't they going to merge with Klook at some stage? Conversation. I think applause to everyone for us having moved from that phase.
We could stay on for another half hour if you want to mention that.
No, I think
but
that.
what about Klug?
I think that's on Yoke. I think that's on Yoke now. I think the peculiarity of them both raising pretty much the same amount of money from the same business, 4 years ago, is now kind of has worn off, and now they each have their own different paths defined for them, which is again a sign of maturity. And we've got three big businesses to watch in the experiences space in Viator, GetYourGuide, and Klug now, to see how, with their each slightly different journeys, it will pan out.
Excellent. Well, thanks very much to all of you. It's been a fantastic discussion. Great perspectives from lots of different angles. I really enjoyed this. Thank you again, and I'll see you guys soon.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Take care. Safe travel. Bye now.
Okay, guys.